What's up, guys? It's Ben with 2020 election predictions, and obviously, I'm not in my normal place right now. I'm out of town, but I still wanted to do a video. In today's video, I'm going to look at what the best case scenario would look like for Joe Biden. I think this is very topical in the news because Trump has been underperforming in a lot of his polls. Some polls have had Joe Biden up nationally as much as 11 and 12 points. Obviously, I've said this in the past that the national polls don't hold much weight, but we've even seen some state polls. There was a Fox News poll the other day that had Donald Trump down by 9 points to Joe Biden in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, like Arizona, is one of these critical states in 2020, and this 9 point advantage for Biden. Obviously, if we average it, it's not as much, but um, in 2016, the polls had Hillary Clinton up by like 5 or 6 points. So uh, a 9 point margin in the polls would be even larger than 2016. So just diving right in, this is where I think the map would look like from just not including kind of the more swing states. I filled in the safe blue states and the likely blue states. And frankly, if this is Joe Biden's best case scenario, you could have the argument that these likely blue states could turn into safe blue states. But obviously, I'm not going to explain as much why these all of these likely blue states voted for Hillary Clinton 2016. I don't think there's a big explanation that I need to make why these would go to Joe Biden because this is Joe Biden's best case scenario. So obviously, there's a lot of things that could work against Donald Trump. I think that these George Floyd protests and how Trump has handled it has damaged him in the polls, and also Trump's response to the coronavirus hasn't necessarily helped them a lot. So let me first look at all of these states that I think are more maybe in this likely or lean column for the blue states. I really think that Michigan actually could be a likely state. Donald Trump narrowly won this in 2016. If we look at the 2008 um, uh, margins of victory for Obama, and this is kind of considered a landslide. I mean, obviously, this is not as big of a landslide as Ronald Reagan had in 1984, but I don't think any candidate, Republican or Democrat, will be able to recreate what Ronald Reagan did. And I don't even know if any candidate will be able to recreate what Barack Obama did, at least in the near future, just because our country has become so polarized and the states are just so different in terms of their demographics and kind of the different political appeals. But if we look at Obama's margin of victory in Michigan, he won the state by 15 points. And obviously, Donald Trump has a different appeal than John McCain had in 2016, and a lot of things have changed. But I think Joe Biden can recreate this margin and potentially win by Michigan by 10 points if the political winds are right. Pennsylvania, not as much, but this is Joe Biden's home state. And then Wisconsin, I would still put in the lean Democratic column if this is kind of Joe Biden's best case scenario, just because it is a lot more Republican friendly. And that poll that had Joe Biden up by 9 is kind of an outlier. But if he can hang and steady there, then Joe Biden could win Wisconsin by 5 or 6 points. And same with Arizona. I know that I think would have this as a lean blue state. Donald Trump won this by 4 points or 3.5 points in 2016. But I mean, all of the polls have Joe Biden up, and that's not to say that that's what the actual results are going to be. But this is obviously Joe Biden's best case scenario. And in his best case scenario, he would win Arizona even up to about 5 points, I believe. The state of Florida, while I think that the polls are definitely overestimating Joe Biden's advantage, if the polls are right, Arizona and Florida kind of track pretty closely to each other and giving Joe Biden a 3 to 4 point margin over Donald Trump. Obama won Florida twice. Donald Trump won Florida by about the same margin Obama did, within 1 to 2 points. So I think Joe Biden could up this margin to 3 or 4 points if in his best case scenario. obviously. So next up, I kind of want to move to some of the more red states. I haven't filled in some obviously red states kind of that I think y'all would expect me to fill in earlier. The first might be Mississippi. I have this as a likely red state, but while I think that all of these red states are um, pretty solidly red. And it might surprise you because I don't know if y'all saw this. So in the 2008 election, President Obama won Indiana, and he became very close in striking distance in Missouri. But if we look at the 2016 results, Donald Trump won Indiana by 19 points, and he won Missouri by was at 19 points as well. So I really don't expect those to be competitive, and the polls haven't indicated that they're competitive at all. However, in Mississippi, Donald Trump won the state by around 17 points, and with a not super popular incumbent Republican senator and Senator Hyde-Smith, she could bring Donald Trump down. I still expect Donald Trump to win this by over 10 points, but Sidney Hyde-Smith really only won the state by 4 to 5 points in her special election in 2019, as I said in the last video. Next up is the state of South Carolina. I also think this is a likely Republican state. Donald Trump won it by 14 to 15 points. But we've seen polls even just recently that has Donald Trump only up by a single-digit margin, and Lindsey Graham being tied or in the margin of error in his 2020 Senate race. So obviously, in Joe Biden's best-case scenario, South Carolina could be a little bit competitive. Same with Utah. So the only reason I'm putting this in this category is because there could be a third-party candidate like there was in 2016. Donald Trump did not win a majority of the votes in Utah. Evan McMullen was kind of this conservative, more kind of played on his Christianity and kind of said that Donald Trump was not a moral candidate, which I think resonated with a lot of the Utah population. It has a large Mormon population. It voted for Mitt Romney in very large numbers, but obviously they don't have Mitt Romney and Donald Trump are very different. Donald Trump doesn't have that same appeal in Utah as Mitt Romney did, even though Donald Trump probably has more of an appeal nationally. So that's why I put Utah in this column. And next up is Montana. I have this as leaning towards the Republicans. I really think the Senate and the governor's race could bring down Donald Trump, kind of like how I think it will in Arizona with Martha McSally on the ticket. Steve Bullock has a very good chance of winning the seat in the Senate against Steve Daines, who's the incumbent. And obviously, Steve Bullock was a pretty popular governor there in 2016. He won re-election as governor even when Donald Trump won Montana by about 20 points. So actually, I'm going to redo my thing and say this is more of a likely state instead of a lean state, but still, it could be fairly competitive. And then same with Alaska. Alaska, like Montana, they aren't like super conservative bastions. Typically, they always vote for the Republican, but Alaska went for Donald Trump by about 14 points. And I don't know if y'all have seen the news recently. Senator Lisa Murkowski came out against Donald Trump, which is pretty interesting. Next up in the Democratic column is New Hampshire. I think, like Florida and Arizona, it is in this. It could lean towards the Democrats in Joe Biden's best case scenario. The polls show it like neck and neck right now, but obviously Joe Biden could open this up. President Obama did win this state in 2008, although it's close, but it has been trending a little bit leftward, I would say. I mean, obviously the results in the elections haven't really demonstrated this, but the population is getting more diverse, and the congressional seats are being redrawn. Next up, going to the tilt states, I think the state of Georgia could tilt towards the Democrats. Obviously, Donald Trump won the state by 5 points, and it's typically been a reliably red state. But especially with all this turmoil coming from the George Floyd protest, Georgia has a very large African-American population, like Mississippi, but Georgia's been trending blue at a faster rate than Mississippi and the other southern states. So I think Georgia could definitely go. Next up is Ohio. Joe Biden has actually been leading Donald Trump in Ohio in some polls, but Ohio went so overwhelmingly for Trump in 2016, so I really don't think it's going to be competitive. But maybe in Joe Biden's best case scenario, he can squeak off Ohio. Obama won Ohio in 2008 and 2012, but the politics have just changed so much recently. And lastly, coming to Iowa and Texas, obviously in terms of the Electoral College, it doesn't really matter. I still think Texas is going to have one election, even in Joe Biden's greatest, um, in his best case scenario. I don't think he will get Texas. In 2018, the political winds were very, very much in the Democrats' favor. It was kind of Beto O'Rourke's best case scenario, and he still lost by 1.5 points, just because Ted Cruz was so unpopular. But still, there's still more Republicans in Texas than there are Democrats. In 2024, I think this is going to completely change. If it's the Democrats' best case scenario, they are going to take Texas. And lastly, is the state of Iowa. Really, this could go either way. Donald Trump won Iowa by almost 10 points in 2016. Could it go to Joe Biden? I've seen the average of the polls, and it's about +5 to Trump. I still have this state as leaning towards the Republicans, even in Joe Biden's best case scenario. So, as you can see, here, there you have it. And also, Nebraska's second district would go. I'm not even going to mess with that. But we have 169 to 369. And if we compare this to President Obama's kind of landslide victory in 2008, it's pretty similar. So Joe Biden could replicate it. I don't think Joe Biden will do this. I don't think any pundits really think this is a realistic scenario right now. But obviously, there's a lot of time, and especially with all this turmoil recently, I thought this would be a very topical video. So please comment what you thought of this video, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all for watching this video, and be on the lookout for my video tomorrow.